Hello and welcome to the Jim Ruff Show. Today our topic is social justice, and we have a special guest, David Whitfield, who teaches classes on social justice at Gonzaga University in the graduate program. And David is also a coach and facilitator and speaker and a consultant. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Yeah, and David, I think we can begin. It'd be fun to hear you talk a little bit about, from your background, about why you have this passion for social justice.
Well, yes, since social justice is about a fairness, social justice is about advantages, disadvantages, equal distribution of advantages and disadvantages. And I go back to my childhood about distribution, advantages, disadvantages. I was about 10 years old, living on a plantation in Mississippi, and had been about 3 days since we had food. So my dad found some corn, and a farmer who had a grinder that could grind the corn finally enough for bread. So my brother Frank and I took the corn to the farmer's house, and we got to the house, and his wife was there, but not the farmer himself, not the husband. So she took us in and fed us, because she looked at us and said, that we were hungry. She saw hunger in our faces, and she brought us into her kitchen, which was against Mississippi state law. So she fed us breakfast that morning, and from that point on, I changed my mind about thinking. Well, let me go back to the story for a minute. I can never forget that white, red, checkered tablecloth and the smell of potatoes and onions and green. Oh, it was just the best breakfast I had had up to that point. So that woman risked her life. She risked her marriage and her life, and she risked our lives too for having done what she did. So from that point on, I started thinking differently about the world in general and people in particular. So, and at that time, I had never heard of social justice, but as I got older, I kept this story running in my head, and I just think social justice is about, again, equal sharing advantages, sharing disadvantages, sharing fairness, and I don't know how do we bring that about? I mean, because in our country today, we don't have, to a degree, fairness. We don't share advantages equitably.
Yes.
So,
right.
And I'd like to know more about how could we approach, how could we go toward transcending this scenario of sharing advantages and disadvantages?
That's great. And I would like to tell a story too. And I love that story of yours, by the way. There was a time, and this isn't at the same level of your story because it's lighter, but I needed to go get 2 flip charts because I was going to facilitate a meeting. Mm-hmm. And we kept them in a closet. And other people knew they were there. Mm-hmm. And some woman had taken them when I went to get them. Mm-hmm. And we stood facing each other, and I needed my flip charts. They were mine. They were our department's flip charts. Mm-hmm. And yet she was using them. And there was a moment when I had the presence of mind to say, let's see, do I really need these flip charts? And I sat there for just a moment, and the woman said, I just thought of something better that I could use better than these flip charts. And I thought, no, it would be better for me not to have those flip charts in this room because it was so small. Mm-hmm. And what happened in that brief moment was that we materialized 4 flip charts. Actually, we didn't really materialize them, but we were 2 flip charts short. Now we're to have 2 too many. There was something that happened in this field of thinking that we went into, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. where we are now in this mode of sharing and trying to figure out what's best for both of us. And that mode of thinking I call choice creating. But before that, we were in a mode of thinking of I need to meet my needs, you need to meet your needs. We're in this win-lose competition for this limited resource. And it seems to me that that's a core difference about how we make this transition, is that we need to shift from this decision-making mode, this win-lose mentality that we're in, into this zone of thinking where we're in this win-win choice-creating mentality.
Okay, so how do we create this change in thinking?
Yes, thank you. Well, I have a strategy for doing that, okay. And the strategy is a facilitative strategy, which means where there's just one facilitator, we don't have to convince everybody, we just have one facilitator who changes the field of thinking for everybody. A little bit the way my question did to myself, spoken out loud did for this woman. So, I mean, that's what a facilitator does, is that they stand in the front of the room and a group comes and they're meeting, but the facilitator has in mind a certain quality of thinking that they're aiming the group toward. And in the kind of facilitation I teach, dynamic facilitation, that quality is choice creating. Then the question is, how do you facilitate for a very large system of people, like society itself?
Exactly.
And that, we believe, can be done through what we call the Wisdom Council.
Okay.
So we have the technology to reach for a small group of people. So if we randomly select from the United States, for instance, 12 people, if they choose the issue, and if they are dynamically facilitated in this choice-creating mode of thinking to reach unanimity on that issue, what we find is that those people, even though they're coming from, there might be rich people, there might be bosses, there might be subordinates, there might be some, single women with children, even though there are different types of people, they're in this mode of thinking, trying to figure out what's best for everybody. And they come up with unanimous statements that everybody leaves excited about.
Okay.
Now the key is, and we can talk about this, they then present this to the whole system, and then we need to tie the whole system so that we're all thinking in that way.
Okay, so let's take an example. There's poverty, there's hunger, there are the isms, racism, ethnocentrism, etc. How would we, if you had America in front of you right now, what would you want them to hear? In other words, how would we approach or go toward transcending some of these isms?
Okay, all right.
Or issues that are really subsumed under social justice.
Yes. Well, to me, it's the bottom line is what we need to do is convene a timeout.
Okay.
Every, say, 4 months or so, or month or whatever. Somehow there's this process where we go about our lives, but there's also this larger process where we're visiting together, trying to figure out what's best for everybody. If that way of thinking can be infused into our society, then that is the fundamental piece. Right now, we don't have that way of thinking. That way of thinking is, the dominant way of thinking when we figure out the ancient people would go into a kiva and they'd send their wisest elders into a kiva and they would go into that thinking and they would pass the peace pipe and they would do whatever it took to get that quality of choice-creating thinking going in the community, and then they would announce their decisions. Well, we need to do that in our society, and the Wisdom Council process is a way to do that. I've sort of lost track of where I was going with that, but
I guess my question is, if you had a large group of people in front of you.
Oh, thank you.
What would you want them to hear? What would you want them to walk away with?
Yeah, okay. Well, I would like, this is Mike, I would love to tell them this story, that this is actually the way we can transform our society.
Okay.
And I would like them to be in the conversation.
Okay.
Now, we don't need to have a lot of people get it, but I would love to have a lot of people get it.
Okay.
What we really need is to just set this process in motion. And if people could get excited about this, I think all of us, for instance, are unanimous. we want to save the planet. We'd love to save the planet. We could talk about that. We could all decide we want to save the planet. But our system prevents us from saving the planet.
Okay.
Our system is oriented toward growth, toward competition for growth, toward this other conversation.
Okay.
So me talking to people isn't going to help in a way, because they are going to take time in and they're going to go back into the system, and the system enforces this other way of thinking.
Okay.
So what we really need is for them to go, oh, we need to make this slight adjustment to our system. We need to institute this wisdom council process.
Yeah.
And if we did that, then we're facilitating this larger conversation.
Okay, let's be more specific. The system is precluding us from making these differences.
Yes.
Co-creating.
That's right.
We are the system. So how do we start a conversation to transform the system?
Okay,
Does that
well,
make
this is it.
Specificity. How do we go there? How do we...
Well, let me back up. We are not the system. The system and we are different.
Okay.
By definition, the system is not the sum of the parts.
Okay. Okay.
So there is a system that we comprise. It's like the cells of your body are not you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay? So there's a context of the cells of your body, and you emerge as an emergent entity, and there you are as a personality that's different than all the cells, and adding them all up. Same thing's true with our society. We, as a people, yeah, okay, there's we recycling our garbage and whatever, but that's not going to do it, because the we together, the people, is going to trash the planet unless we make that change.
Okay.
So the key is the Wisdom Council process is about shifting the system so that there is a we the people,
Okay.
so that we're thinking what we all, commonsensically, we're all thinking like, of course we don't want to trash the planet. Of course we need to set up structures that don't trash the planet.
Yeah.
Of course we need to build electrical cars or non-oil-based energy sources. And of course we need to invest in these things. And of course we want everybody to have enough food and enough, I think we all want that.
Yeah.
It's just that our system precludes it at the moment.
Okay, but how do we start a conversation? We need to change the conversation.
Yes,
And I
yes.
think behavior is a function of how we think and what we think.
Yes.
I mean, at least
Yes.
that's how I understand that.
Yes.
So how do we change...
The
how
total
do we-
conversation.
Yeah, how do we change the conversation, be it on racism,
Exactly.
hunger, education?
Right. So we randomly select 12 people
Okay.
every 4 months.
Okay,
The randomly select people do 3 things. They are, if they choose the issue, they get to pick the issue.
okay,
They reach unanimity
okay,
in a unanimous thing, and if they're random. So it's a
Okay.
randomly selected group talking in this choice-creating way. Basically, choice creating is the key. And they come up with unanimous answers. Then they're a legitimate symbol of we the people.
okay.
That is all of us,
Okay,
symbolically.
okay,
Now, the key is all of us need to somehow feel part of that conversation.
okay,
So this group then presents, and we're going to do this, the plan. I keep saying this, but right now there's a new plan to do this in February, where this randomly selected group speaks to an auditorium full of celebrities and people from the right, people from the left, gathered in maybe somewhere in the Midwest. So you randomly select, they come up with unanimous choices, they speak to this large convention. The large convention is in dialogue. They're talking about what they came up with. And basically we've done experiments with this, and the whole audience basically says, yeah, we think so too.
okay,
And then we need to have the media there, or the web, maybe web media if we don't get national media, there, so that people can begin to tune in and watch this process.
okay,
And it happens periodically, every 4 months. A different randomly selected group, they speak. And the idea is to create one total national conversation with all of us as participants.
okay. So if they've created a choice,
Choice creating, yeah.
They've choice created,
Yeah,
if I may use
yeah,
that
okay,
term.
yeah.
What would it look like if it were about education or race or hunger or what would you see if the choice were created as you described?
The first sessions, and we've done this actually, the first ones are going to say, well, of course we should be putting more money into education than into our defense. Of course we should. I mean, in other words, with these bajillions of dollars we're spending for submarines, nuclear submarines and whatever, just one of those would transform our school systems. It's not too hard to figure out how to allocate these funds.
Right.
But in fact, I can't even figure out what the value of a new nuclear submarine is at this point. I'm not really sure. They're just out there in the ocean somewhere. So, but the way we make collective decisions, there's a different process in play, and it's a competitive process, and there's a very strong special interest that wants to keep that process going. There's not a very strong special interest for kids and education. So the first statements would be obvious things, but we would all look around and realize, hey, we're unanimous about this. And there's no higher authority than all of us being unanimous about this. And in other words, Congress is not a higher authority than that. The Constitution is not a higher authority than that. We are the authority. And that beginning awakening that we are really in charge of our system, that we are really in charge of our setup, we, for instance, have the ability to vote out these people who don't go along with our will. So that what we come up with unanimously, we can back it up. Because in the existing Constitution, we can vote these people in and out. We don't even, I mean, in theory, we the people could change the Constitution just by saying, hey, we're unanimous, let's do it this other way.
But it doesn't change the thinking necessarily.
Well, I think it does change the thinking, not because the process of thinking is choice creating. In other words, the facilitator, the dynamic facilitator, working with the small group, assures choice creating in that room. And when they come on the stage and they present their ideas and they present the story of how they got to those ideas, we've found that the audience then enters into something like choice creating in their small group dialogues. And they all break into small groups, or if they were to watch on TV and see it at churches or community clubs or taverns or whatever, and just start talking, their conversations are not yes, no, back, forth, this is bad, this is good. They're not talking like that anymore.
Okay.
The bigger audience is not talking like that anymore. Because the group is trying to figure out what's best for everybody, and they're basically saying, this is as far as we got, that we're all agreed that this needs to happen. We came up with maybe 3 ideas about how it could happen. This one we certainly want to do. This one we're not sure of. We need more expert opinion, whatever. And then then they disappear, and the newspapers can pick it up from there, and then randomly select a new group.
For a different issue or the same issue?
It's up to that group.
Okay.
That group picks up. Now, what we found in closed systems is that the group picks what they think is a different issue, but it often ties back to what it is the same issue.
Okay. Because I guess what concerns me is right now we're spending, last statistics about the war, $500,000 per minute.
Yes.
That's $500,000 a minute.
Yeah.
Yet there's school systems that don't have pencils, papers, books, et cetera, et cetera. So what would it look like if this group, this Wisdom Council, has created a choice for the school system? What would we see? What would we see that would be radically different or different? For example,
well,
I don't know if we have time to get into all of that.
Yeah, I know. I can only guess. But I think first of all, we would become collectively intelligent. In other words, right now we're all individually intelligent, but our system keeps us collectively stupid because we're building weapons instead of taking care of basic business and infrastructure. So, but this is a way for us to become collectively intelligent and start making new choices. And I think one of the basic things would happen is our level of trust would start to zoom.
Okay.
In other words, you don't make money. Nobody makes any money if we're all trust one another.
Okay.
If we're in a state of trust, then you just give your time to people, and you leave the doors open, and everybody, everybody has needs, but you support their needs. It's a giving society. So, but that doesn't make anybody, when we're in the mode of self-interest, that is a killer, because now our economy is going to tank because we're not making money. I mean, it's like, women that raise their kids. There's no GNP from that. We don't not making any. The numbers don't go up. So I believe what would happen is we would have a society of trust and goodwill, and that secondarily would be the economy, the money economy. Obviously, and we're not taking any freedoms away, we're just changing the way all of us think at the same time, so that we're now in this conversation, just like I did when I talked about the flip charts. And I said, well, wait a minute, do I need this flip chart? And she responded in her way, wait a minute, I don't maybe need this either. And we both got creating. In this case, we were creating for ourselves, we weren't creating together, but we both flipped our heads around so that we're thinking now in a totally different way.
Okay, so you're saying that this process, if I may call it a process, would constitute or foster a change in thinking, like the farmer's wife. No one told her to do that. She just saw us being hungry, and she fed us.
Yes.
The lady, you and the lady who were hopefully grappling over the flip charts.
Right, exactly.
So how, I guess what I'm trying to get at is critical mass. How do we get critical mass with this process?
Hold on. Now, the critical mass is an old paradigm. In my mind, it's a different paradigm that we're talking about, the concept. This is about, and I might be wrong about that, but to me this is about whole system change all at once. In other words, when I facilitate a meeting, my way of thinking about it is I'm creating a field in which everybody in that room is now thinking at this higher level. I don't need critical mass.
Okay.
So if we create a field where all of us are in this deeper, richer conversation together, it isn't so much about critical mass. Now, if we don't have that capability of setting up the field, and we're just a bunch of individuals plopped down on Earth, now we need critical mass.
What do you mean by field? Is this like a vessel?
Well, I think of it as like, when I'm standing in front of a room, what I do with one person when they speak affects everybody.
Okay.
Everybody sees it.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, we're now, the level of thinking that everybody's involved in is at a higher level.
Okay.
So it's not just a onesie-twosie kind of thing. We're dealing with the whole system. So that to me is the secret here, is that if we is recognizing that a system is different than all of us. We talk about we need to make strategic decisions, or we need to build the political will. That was Al Gore's punchline in his movie, The Inconvenient Truth. We need to build the political will to make these changes. Well, the we he's talking about is all these individuals out there. We, the people, if it was all of us together as one, well, that is the political will.
Okay. And how does that affect the aggregate? Right now the aggregate is decided differently versus how we're talking right now. How differently will the aggregate look? Specifically, when we vote in the congresspersons, presidents, they're going to create an aggregate for a certain group, not for everyone. The 49%, for example, who lost,
right,
they have a different aggregate. And chances are that aggregate is substandard. There's hunger, there's poverty, there's lack of, the list goes on.
Well, we're out of time, so I'm going to cut you short. But to me, it's like the difference between being in the marketplace, or being in maybe not the marketplace, but being in this competitive game versus being at the Thanksgiving table.
Okay.
When you're at the Thanksgiving table, you don't want somebody to miss out on the mashed potatoes.
Right.
I mean, you take the mashed potatoes that make sure everybody gets served.
Right.
Because you're in that space, you're in that field. Everybody's in that field.
Right.
Anybody who's not in that field, you kind of look at them aghast and you wonder what's going on. Why did you take the mashed potatoes?
Right.
And they feel that sense of correctness. But in the other field, well, of course you're going to build the biggest house and take the most resources as you possibly can and build a 8,000-foot mansion and other people, and then you have another home and you have a couple of other homes when lots of people are going homeless, because that's common sense in that field. And the common sense in this field is that we're all working together trying to figure out what's best for everybody.
Right.
The Wisdom Council is a way to flip that so that we're now in this field instead of this other one.
Okay, so the Wisdom Council is key.
It's the key. It's the leverage, the point of leverage.
Okay.
And the bad news is we've run out of time. But the good news is I really appreciate your being here and helping me
Thank you.
with this thing. And obviously this is a life passion for me, and I'm so glad that you're taking this idea forward.
Yeah.
Thank you, David Whitfield.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure. Wow. We're just getting started.
No!